evening, everyone. This is the March 10th, 2015 meeting of the Spencer Finance Committee. It's 7 o'clock, and I will call the meeting to order. First on the agenda is the minutes of the February 24th, 2015 meeting that were emailed to everyone.
If you don't have them, there are copies.
Okay. Everyone get them in email?
Yep.
Okay, anyone care to make a motion regarding them?
Oh, go ahead.
Make a motion to
Second.
accept the minutes as read.
Okay, second?
Second. John.
Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Correspondence. I've just been giving you these, the discs, the 2014 Finance Committee Handbook. They're published by the Association of Town Finance Committees. And I get a letter every year that says I can just request one for each member of the Finance Committee. There they are. They came the other day. I also just received upstairs in the mailbox, I just got this letter dated March 2nd from Sue Torrey, the school district treasurer, that in accordance with Section 9 budget, paragraph A of the regional school agreement, the Spencer East Brookfield Regional School Committee approved and is enclosing a tentative budget for the school district for the upcoming fiscal year 2015-2016. The school committee has approved this budget on February 24, 2015 in the amount of $24,752,942. The tentative budget is based upon the fiscal 2015 state aid numbers and minimum local contributions. The breakdown of the tentative assessment to the town of Spencer would be as follows. Operating assessment, $7,182,310. Transportation assessment, $1,218,752. Debt assessment, $245,394. Total assessment, $8,646,456. I know that Adam's going to talk a little bit about it when he talks about the budget. So I'll just leave it at that. The other thing is this came out before the governor's budget came out. So these numbers are subject to change. They're actual House 1 budget numbers, which are again not cast in concrete, but this one came out before that. You're going to talk about the school budget.
I will talk about everything. Yep.
So, okay. All right, and of course, the Beacon, February 2015, if anyone wants to look at that, you're more than welcome to. Okay, liaison reports, school committee, Julie.
I don't have anything to report.
Okay,
We're here.
that's great. Yeah, this time of year, everybody meets at the same time anyway. Capital Planning Committee, Nancy Rhodes.
Okay, last week we met with the library, Mary Bakerwood, Bill Shemuth, Parks and Rec, Sewer Department, Sue Rabideau, and then Stephen Townley tonight. And they put all their requests out, and we're scoring them at this point. Listen to them, we put in our recommendations, give them to Adam, and then next week should be the last meeting, where we'll just kind of discuss everything that's been presented.
Okay. So, okay, so just still working on your report. Good. All right, I think we'll take item 6 out of order. Item 5 was town administrator to review the governor's budget, but since we have the folks from the different departments, public works departments here, we'll ask you folks to present first, and then even though I'm going to have to listen to the governor's budget. So, sewer department, would you like to?
Sure.
Okay.
Just wanna come up.
Thank you.
Just for introductions for the public, Mark Robidoux is our superintendent, and Larry Dufo, who's our one of the three sewer commissioners.
Thank you.
So they have several different budget sheets, which you have in your packet. One is salary and wages, one is general expenses, and then capital outlay and debt service, which is related to the borrowing that they've done. So the salary and wages is broken down for, just like all of our other departments. You'll have, in this case, we have three commissioners, they get an annual stipend. We have superintendent, and then we have several operators, one's the chief, and then three assistant chiefs. This budget is slightly different than the one you've seen in the past, as I'd like to congratulate Mr. Robidoux, who he will be retiring later this year. So we have incorporated the addition of a superintendent. Maybe you want to explain that. How are you guys going to be planning, how have you planned the transition for your succession, Mark? In terms of the overlap of.
We have an assistant chief operator that's working at the plant presently, and first of all, we asked the chief operator if he wanted to take over the position at the treatment plant as superintendent. He declined that. He just felt that he was only gonna be there for maybe 5 years, and he was happy in his position now. So then we went to another operator, assistant chief operator, and he came right out and said that that's why he came to work for Spencer. He wanted eventually to have my job. So what we're doing is we're offering him the position, and we're trying to get another operator on board for the remainder of this fiscal year and for the time that I would be training the assistant chief operator to learn my job and things that I do and what I know about the treatment plant. So as of now, that's the plan for, to have someone else come in.
And so are you here through the rest of the calendar year, or?
I'm here till December
Oh, okay,
of next year,
Next
of
year.
this year.
Yeah.
This year.
this year, so December 2015. And just, I mean, I'm just asking this because I'm curious. There must be some very specialized qualifications.
You have to have, it's required that you have at least a grade 5 operator's license for that. You should have some computer skills and management skills. And the person that is requesting the job and that we've chosen has been in management for other different jobs, where sometimes you might have managed 20 people or more. He was working in Sturbridge at the water and wastewater, so he had both, experience in both those fields.
So you'll have an extra person for a short time then, for the rest of this year?
Right,
Okay,
so that I can begin training.
right, exactly, oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And something that's unique to the enterprise funds is that they actually have a percentage of, they pay for a percentage of the administrative support staff at the Utilities and Facilities Department. So you can see that on the bottom where it says senior clerk and junior clerk. So we have 2 full-time clerks that work in the Utilities and Facilities office, which is at the Water Department building, and 25% of their salary is paid for by water, 25% is paid by sewer, and the other 50% is paid by Utilities and Facilities Department. Okay, and I can show you that again on Steve's budget when he does the UNF. The second part of their budget is general expenses. This is where the first part is all of their communications, utilities, and then below there, different supplies, and then you start getting to repairs, maintenance, and additional supplies that are unique to the department, and services as well. So did you have any changes at all, Mark, there that you want to talk about?
Nothing really major. Their electricity, we've reduced that from last year because the rates did come down, and last year, when the rates were going down, we did make a reduction. So we went from $164,000 last year's budget to $142,000. We've reduced alum for phosphorus treatment from $38,000 to $32,000. Probably the largest increase is going to be for our waste sludge disposal, where we were $111,600 last year, and we're going up to $125,000. And that's because the price of hauling and disposal has increased, as well as the amount of septage that we're receiving at the treatment plant has increased, which makes more waste sludge that we have to get rid of. And that's probably the largest areas that had changes.
Any questions on expenses for Mark or Larry? Okay, the next two items are related to capital projects. The capital outlay is a budget line item, if you will, that sometimes you'll see trucks in there or other types of equipment. This year, the sewer department is proposing two projects. One, the first one I'll talk about is the Main Street reconstruction project. That's a project that Steve's been working diligently on, and we're happy to see that the sewer department is partnering on board where we expect, hopefully, construction. We advertise for FY16, calendar year 2016, the renovation and improvements of Grove Street to High Street, which is obviously a key section of downtown, our key strip there. So Steve's been working on a grant-related project through his participation at the Central Mass Planning Commission and with the MMPO there. That project we're looking to fund through the Transportation Improvement Program. It's a federal program. That money gets funneled eventually down to the regional planning commissions. It's a $3.7 million project, I believe. And as part of that project, we'd like to make some sewer improvements while we're doing improvements to the rest of the road. You know, drainage, pavement, sidewalks, curbing, etc. So while the road's up, you're going to be doing some work as well. Have you guys videoed that section so you kind of have an idea of what you're doing, improvements you're going to be making? Okay.
We've already had an engineer report completed
Correct.
as to what they suggest that we do. And we're going to be discussing that tomorrow night at the sewer meeting.
Right. So that, and then the next project that we're talking about is the sewer bank. Sewer bank is anytime a new project comes online, new home comes online, new tie-in, monies are supposed to be allocated towards the I&I program. That's inflow and infiltration. So that's any water that's getting into the system that shouldn't be, such as from sump pumps, such as from just groundwater getting into the pipes, etc. So they're looking to take some money out of their sewer bank or money that they have available to apply to the I&I program. This initial $50,000, they're going to be spending their version of free cash called retained earnings. So their entire budget is going to be funded. I forgot the total budget number. I'd say 1.3 million is going to be funded. I'll show you on the next page when we go through the revenue. There is funded through user fees, combination of fees that they collect, revenue from people bringing stuff to the plant, and other tie-in fees. And then in this case, this year, they're going to apply 150, I think, out of the 280 or so retained earnings that they have. And they're going to do two capital projects, and that's what we like to see. We do the same thing on the town side. Any of our surplus revenue, we're going to use to apply to a capital project. So the money's going right back into the system. It's excess money that they didn't spend last year, that people paid as part of their fees. They're going to take that money and put it right back into the system. They're also putting a small portion of that, to about $12,000, to balance the rates, and that'll close out their ending balance for retained earnings. So those are the projects that they have planned. The I&I, again, they have reports. They know areas across town where there's water getting into the system that they shouldn't. So what that means is the plant is not only treating wastewater, it's also treating groundwater, which takes up capacity, and DEP doesn't like to see that. And they have to actually report, I think, on a monthly basis, right? How much?
Well, we report flows every month.
Every month.
So they can certainly see the change in flow.
So,
So what are what do you do to address that groundwater issue?
You could either repair manholes if they're leaking, either replace them or repair them. You can also reline sewer pipes. I mean, a lot of the problems that Spencer has is they have a lot of old clay pipes in the sewer system. And clay pipes have joints every 3 feet or 2 feet. And they're not watertight joints. So as the groundwater goes above the pipes, the water just infiltrates, inflows.
So some of it's runoff and some of it's just natural
It's groundwater.
groundwater.
pipes are laid in the swampy areas or next to rivers. And it's something that they've got an I&I report, but I would say that if you were to look at areas where the sewers are not in the roads, they're called easement sewers, you would probably find a large portion of I&I that you could remove. And that would cost more than the 50,000 we have in there, but it's a start.
And it would mean literally replacing the pipes or
Or
regrading the?
you could reline the pipes instead
okay.
of digging.
Uh-huh. Oh,
If-
all right. Yeah.
But first, you would have to video inspect the lines to see that they're in the shape
Right.
that would allow relining to be done.
We now have a video camera, and all, we share it with the highway department for, it's just storm drains and that type of thing, Steve, yeah?
Yes, I'm glad to see you use it on projects like this, absolutely.
So it saves us some money as a town and as, you know, users, et cetera, by having that, and when we need it, it's there.
What is it on, like a robot arm or something? How do you get it in there?
I haven't seen it, I saw it at a
It's
show 3 years ago.
It has 1,000 feet of cable, and the camera itself is on wheels that robotically will power that camera through the pipes.
And it can look around, it's not just this
Yeah, the camera
Camera
can
can
scan,
change.
tilt.
angles and stuff, it's a nice unit. But there is a lot, we know where a lot of the problems are for I&I, but you
It's
could
having
take
the
this
money.
budget and quadruple it, and you wouldn't even scratch the surface, you know?
Is it something you can do piecemeal though? If you
Yeah.
had to, or?
Yes.
A lot of times before, the economy, got bad, we had, a fair number of builders in town that were, looking to reserve, capacity at the plant, that type of thing. And, when they were gonna build a project, instead of them paying us, which is what the average homeowner do, because they don't have the ability to go out and physically get the work done, but these guys would hire a contractor or something, and they can do it a lot cheaper than we can, because we have to go with prevailing wage when we do any work. Whereas a guy putting up a bunch of condos or something, and we tell him, okay, in order for you to get them hooked up, we need to remove X number of cubic feet of water, and here's where you can do the work, and they'll go out and repair it to our specs,
Yeah, right.
But it's a good way to do things, but not many come and follow right now.
Have you added a lot of new people, new homes, new facilities to the sewer system?
Not
have more
lately, but there
sludge,
is a
if you-
project that's coming on, the Bixby Trail Estates project will probably be a large one. But over the years, no, it's just been a few connections here and there.
And what percent of the households are on the sewer, do you know? Just curious.
We've got like 1,580, say 1,600 maybe connections. I think it's estimated it could be 50% of the town, 40 to 50%, somewhere in that range.
Population.
If there haven't, I'm sorry, Nancy, were you done?
Yes.
Okay. If there haven't been very many new connections lately, what would you attribute to the increase in the sludge volume?
Septage. We take septage from all communities.
Oh, okay, so it's not just Spencer?
It gets trucked in.
Okay, all right.
So
But that-
you
that-
make money off
Yeah, we'll
it.
go over that in the
Yeah.
next page. We have a fee structure where they actually collect fees from the towns, septic trucks coming in.
On the revenue.
And if you look back at that small increase, I think, on the sludge removal to be trucked and all, yeah, we're way ahead in what we're getting in revenue from all the septic coming in.
Okay, so the next section is debt service, and these are the projects that they borrowed money for. You can see we list the annual town meeting, the article, and also the project, special town meeting as well. You can see the total amount of money that was borrowed, the payoff year, principal and interest, and the total amount that's being attributed to their budget that's related to debt, and that's the 277. Okay, and that's paid as part of the user fee and the other income that they receive. Okay, so actually, I don't think they have a copy of the revenue structure, Mark. I think I emailed them last year.
Okay.
Maybe if I can borrow it.
Sure.
So, yeah, just to summarize, so they have basically a pro forma that they use based on their 1551 base user accounts at the rate of $74.50. That brings about $462,000 in revenue. They have also a certain number of users, 0 to 5,000 cubic feet, which brings in almost another $500,000. The septage that we talked about, that is trucked in, it's $210,000. Also tight tank, they take waste from there, that's $30,000. They have St. Joseph's Abbey, which brings their waste, which is attributed to their
That's the
manufacturing,
jelly.
the jelly, is about $11,000. Another $20,000 from Spencer Brewery. And then they forecast a connection fee, a very modest number, as Mark just mentioned, there hasn't been much activity in development. Same thing with sewer bank fees, maybe, assuming just one.
connection.
And then they have small investment revenue. So they bring in about a total of 1.23 million, they're projecting in terms of those revenue sources. The budget itself, with the improvements that we mentioned, it brings the budget to about 1.39 million. That's gonna be balanced by the $150,000 in retained earnings that I mentioned for the two specific projects, and then another $12,304 in retained earnings, which means that there will be no user fee increase in FY16. It'll stay the same rate it is, and by using some of that surplus and applying it to as a revenue source for them, so they balance their budget that way. So I apologize, I think I emailed you guys last week, and this came in like Monday, I think, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So how many, so Bixby, that proposed development there, that
Bixby
is,
Trail Estates.
and it will hook up to the sewers?
Yes.
I didn't pay attention to how far down the road it was, so.
It's a project that's been around for some time,
Yeah.
06 maybe? Yeah.
Right. All right, well, does anyone else have any questions? Well, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you're
Good to-
welcome.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you
and-
Thanks, Larry.
And enjoy your last few months.
Last
I
budget.
am.
Right, this is your last finance
Last budget,
That's right,
presentation.
yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Good job.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
If you
Congratulations.
get bored, you can always come back.
You as well.
That's right, you can go back to the other side of the finance committee
That's
table.
You
I won't-
have to
I
move
won't
to
be
Spencer,
here.
yeah.
I'm going to sunny weather.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Well, my wife left to go soon, so she wants me to quit.
All right, so next, Steve Tyler, he's here for
Water?
several different projects he's in charge of. I figure we'll do water first, because it's very closely in line with the presentation you just heard,
Yeah,
and then the other ones are more unique to themselves. So, if you look to the next page in your packet, the water department's budget, same thing, they have salaries, and then we'll get into expenses and debt and capital. So very similar to a sewer, they have 3 commissioners, annual stipend. We have a chief water system operator, who is under the personnel bylaw, and then we have 3 assistant chief operators that are under the town collective bargaining unit with the utility facilities group. We also have funding for seasonal labor, overtime, and then, I'm sorry, I read the wrong numbers before. Water is 50% of the salary, where UNF is 25% and sewer is 25%. Okay, so pretty much the same structure as the sewer department. Obviously, there's no transition here, so you don't have that little overlap that Mark was talking about with him leaving and having a superintendent for part of the year being trained by him, and then an assistant chief operator coming on in line as well. So these 4 positions are stable as such, the full-time positions. Any question with how we staff that? Okay. The next section is the general expenses. Similar, it's set up with utilities in the beginning, And then they do have a lot of similar items like chemicals and supplies and vehicle maintenance, but they also have water system maintenance and testing, which is required as part of their DEP permitting. And then the second part of the page, we have office supplies and such, and facilities and supplies. So Steve, were there any major changes to this $425,000 expense budget with the water department?
The changes were typically just based on the historical, where things were adjusted just for either increase or decrease in cost. Did add an item in two places. Under the power, heat, and cooling, we added at least a line item for separate line items for HVAC and plumbing expenses, because those had been exceeding what the single line item was in the past. And then over in this next page, where the first heading is facilities / properties maintenance and permitting, we've added some maintenance items for our tanks. Our tanks are going to need some routine maintenance beginning this year, Highland and Moose Hill. And then the other things were just minor changes. In our office and staff, there was a minor postage increase and an item added for public education outreach. So nothing major, just basically
Breaking out a couple
inflation
things so you can
changes.
track them, and then inflation.
Yep.
You guys have any questions on the expenses? Okay. Water department, the next item is debt service. They don't have capital outlay built into the budget per se, but they will have an article on the town meeting warrant. I'll show you that when we go over the warrant at a later meeting. They will be transferring money from retained earnings. It's, you can do it one of two ways. One way, as I showed you, that the sewer department was doing, is they were incorporating into their budget, incorporating into their user fees, and then applying retained earnings to offset that additional expense. What the water department's decided to do is they're gonna keep their budget as such, salary, expenses, and debt, and then they're gonna take their reserves and apply that for a capital expense or capital purchase with a separate warrant article. So they're both appropriate, and in this case, the water department, we don't have a capital outlay, we have debt service. These are the loans that they have, the borrowing that's associated with the department. Obviously, the major one is the SRF loan. That was the water tank project going back several years now, in which it was a costly project. We did receive some RR money from the federal government to offset some of the costs there, but we do have that major loan. And there's also a second part of that loan, loan number 2, and then other improvements along the way, that going back to 07, 08, and 03, 06, there, or 91, I'm sorry. So those are the debts that they have. If there's any questions for Steve, you can help answer those. But that's all gonna be incorporated into their similar structure. So I don't have that structure with me as well. I think the assistant accountant's working on that in terms of the revenue flow, but so what basically will happen is they will do the same thing. They will have, factor in their income, factor in their expenses, look at the rates, any offsets that they have. They have a public hearing if you need to change the rates.
If we did, yes.
If you did, and if not, then you would not have that public hearing. And all that requires approval at town meeting. So you'll see a warrant article on the town meeting warrant for approval of the water department's budget.
And is it the water rates, the water meter that determines the sewer as well, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The water meters generate both the water and sewer bills.
Both ones.
So are the rates gonna change or no?
We don't have on our agenda to change rates for water this year.
What do you do with public outreach and education? What is that exactly?
It could basically public pamphlets and handouts and brochures that we make available to the public. There's a couple of areas where we're required to kind of do some type of public outreach to inform people, things like conserving water, and other outreach we are required in other departments like stormwater, education, and that type of stuff. So it's simple things.
Is
Maybe
that-
include a flyer that's in our mailer.
Is that new this year, you said? This is
We've been
new?
doing it, but I just didn't have an expense item for it.
Oh, I see.
So the actual activity is not new, just to having a line item for it is new.
How
So
was it funded last year then?
It was just available monies from expenses, and basically it didn't have that, I didn't really have too much available monies from expenses, so it's just what was little available I could grab to do something. So I was kind of short. I wanted to put a mailer in, but I didn't really have enough money to put the kind of mailer in I wanted to. Like the first year, we put something in one of our water bills.
Do you send out, to each person a breakdown of the water analysis that's done? Do you have to do that?
We do not have to do that. That's one of the things that we make publicly available. It's basically, you can come to the water department and sit on our front counter in our window. We make it available to the public. We don't have to mail it to all the users.
Oh, it's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement to mail it. It's a requirement to generate it and make it publicly available.
Okay, it's not on the website then?
No, it's this big it turns out to be this big poster thing. It just really doesn't lend itself well to the website, this report.
No.
You had some programs on Spencer Cable Access, were those water, related stormwater?
Those were more, they touched on drinking water and stormwater, but it did have to do with water quality. It's basically, the water quality cycle, and try to make people aware of some of those factors, what goes out come.
Right, another form of outreach.
Exactly. Yep.
And are those provided to you by an agency?
That particular video was purchased under our CIC grant for stormwater. And it was relatively inexpensive. It was put out by the University of Penn State, I believe.
Thanks. Any other questions about water?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now we're gonna get into so those are the two enterprise funds that we have, the sewer department, you heard them, and the water department. Now we're getting into general fund departments line items. The first is utilities and facilities. Utilities and facilities, Steve's title is utilities and facilities superintendent, but he's in charge of the water department, UNF. He's in charge of the transfer station, the highway department, and takes on other obligations as eventually flow down to him, such as helping with the parks and other projects at some of the buildings. So here we have 3 people in his office. That's Steve and the 2 clerks. As I mentioned before, the 2 clerks. We have their whole salary budget up top, and then it's deducted on the bottom, less the water and sewer and transfer station. A portion of their salaries, the water and sewer, are tied to those other departments. And you can see a further breakdown below of the reimbursables. So the senior clerks are applied to the water and sewer, and then Steve's budget's broken down between water and transfer station. Steve does not have any control with the sewer, even though we partner up with them in some projects and try to work together. The sewer commissioners, going back several years, there was, I think, a legislative act that kind of maintained the sewer commissioners and the water commissioners separate, and then utilities facilities superintendent is in charge of administering the water. However, just like I have a board, Steve has a board that he works with. Are there any questions in terms of the staffing of this department? It's very, so the clerk's obviously handling administrative duties, and Steve doing administrative stuff, and everything else that falls under a manager, dealing with personnel issues, scheduling, budgeting, and applying for grants, and everything else that Steve does. Tied to that is their expense budget. Again, you're not seeing maintenance costs, building costs, fleet management costs. These are mostly administrative items, trainings, office supplies. Steve is our go-to person in the town for geographic information system. That's basically digital mapping. Steve, that number falls under his budget. Steve's got a lot of experience being a professional engineer, working with maps, and it seemed to be a good fit, and that's where that is. We are part of a regional program with CMRPC for technical assistance, where we and I think 10 other towns contribute $4,000 each, which allows us to get technical assistance in providing them a lot of mapping for the town, or mapping updates, different projects, that, if you will. And then he does have small building maintenance tied to the UNF building and some other administrative costs. And then down below, you'll see landfill costs. These costs used to be in the transfer station budget, but the selectmen, when they restructured the transfer station budget last year, withdrew this from that budget, because that budget, what we tried to do is have the revenues and expenses match each other, basically have them balance each other out. Basically, all the expenses being paid for by users. By having this in there, you have the users paying for something that they're not using. The landfill cap is tied to the town itself, even though it's indirectly tied to the transfer station. It goes back years before when the total town had that as an expense. So we do have some monitoring and some maintenance associated with that. That falls under this utilities and facilities budget under Steve's direction as well. Any question on UNF? Next would be highway and transfer station. The first is highway department salaries and wages. We have 9 positions, 1 being the foreman, so we have 8 operators. We also have a facilities maintenance worker who we share with the library, and a seasonal laborer where we'll do work over the summer to help with the mowing crew. So we have a highway foreman who pretty much can use any piece of equipment assigned, but is also assigned to scheduling projects and coordinating projects. We're looking with contractors, working closely with Steve in budgeting and purchasing and other items. We have 2 mechanics / HEO. HEO is heavy equipment operator. That's the next, in terms of the tier of level of employee in that department. They not only can use the equipment and will plow and backhoe and other things, they also have the ability to be mechanics on those pieces of equipment where the others in lower grades do not. The lower grades being heavy equipment operator and light equipment operator. So there's certain pieces of equipment, certain licenses that you have to operate those. And all these positions fall under the town's collective bargaining agreement with the Utilities and Facilities Department. Any questions?
So if these are the fellows who have been clearing the roads, they've been doing a good job. I mean, given what they have to work with, they just keep plugging at it.
Thank you, I agree.
Yep,
They
absolutely.
work
Yeah.
tirelessly.
It's
been a heck of a winter for
It's
them.
been a nasty winter. So you have 8, you have a foreman and 8 operators. What, is this optimum for a town this size?
The answer is no. We're definitely understaffed, and, combination of factors. Town the size, town also has a huge land area, town has quite a bit of road mileage as compared to its population. And so, what it amounts, when I just started just 3 years ago, we we're at 11 people, we're down to 9. And if you use those 9 people and say we have 120 miles of road, that means each person is responsible for about 12 or 15 miles of road. And that's just talking about just the road, just general road maintenance, and then you multiply that times 2, because you got a lane going each way, so you got 30 miles of road. How long do you think it would take a person to keep, 30 miles of road maintained? And then given the condition in this winter, it's gonna be really tough out there doing potholes. Keeping up with we also do all the parks and recs, all the building facilities, sites. So there's a lot of maintenance activities that gets spread pretty thin amongst really 8 people on a regular basis. The foreman is pretty much supervising, he's participating, but he's keeping an eye on all the other men, so.
So what, other than the snow removal, do you have to have overtime, do you wind up having overtime to handle ordinary jobs, or how do you, or do you
We
not get
typically
that?
have overtime available, but we typically avoid that during regular jobs. It would have to be, a real critical situation, something that just couldn't wait and had to be done, where we would go
So with
overtime on the snow days.
8 instead of 11, or 8 instead of 10, if one's the foreman,
Yeah.
what do you notice as differences? What is either not getting done or getting done more slowly, falling behind, what, anything?
On
Well,
everything.
Everything is being done more slowly and everything is falling behind. The cycle to actually do all our routine maintenance of all the parks and facilities and sites takes a little bit longer. Another thing that we do is the routine roadside brush mowing.
Mhm.
That is probably increased by 50% or more. This winter being so tough, we've had some vehicles and trucks breaking down, so our mechanics are actually spending time in the garage during the storms fixing vehicles. So we're actually down people even during snowstorm events and other events. Other things and some of the big things that aren't being done is some of the maintenance and infrastructure improvements that we could do, like drainage work or culvert replacements. If we have our highway staff out there with our own equipment replacing culverts and so forth, we can do it for 30–40% of the cost of what it normally be, meaning if it was a $100,000 project, we could maybe replace a culvert for 20 or 30,000, literally, that type of numbers. So it hurts us in that area too, because we're falling behind in that work and we don't have the money to pay you know, to get it done through a bid type project. Those are the big things I think.
What would be what would be sort of a reasonable staff for you that would keep up with the basic things? How many people?
My feeling for a reasonable staff would be at least 11 people plus one full-time building maintenance worker.
Just building maintenance, just going from building to building?
Yes.
Taking care of
Yes.
anything?
Right now, we have the one person that's on here, the facility maintenance worker, that's at 9.5 hours.
Mhm.
Almost never see him. He's pretty much dedicated to 2 buildings, and he's really spread kind of thin in even those 2 buildings.
Mhm, mhm.
We could definitely use him in all the buildings. If we had someone that was 40 hours a week, there's things that could be done in all the buildings.
So right now, for things like the culverts, you're managing them, and those kinds of things, you're managing them on an emergency basis?
Yes. You know, last year I had permitted to replace 11 or 12, and I was able to replace 4. And I hope to replace like maybe 8 or 9 of them. I didn't think I'd get to all of them.
Mm.
And if I may add, the other things I heard is if we were called out to strike the parking lots at the schools for a week or 2 weeks. You know, that might have saved the school a little bit of money, but it didn't save the town money.
Mhm.
You know, and if we might have saved the school $1,000 or $2,000, but it didn't save the town the $30,000 had we replaced a culvert instead.
Right. So, overall, a couple more people would pay for themselves
Yes,
in what you say?
in correct. I think a lot of the people are on the capital committee, so they see the issues and so forth with some of our infrastructure, not just the drainage and pipes and systems, but the buildings. You know, being able to keep the buildings maintained in a better shape and that type of stuff is going to save money in the long run.
Mhm. Right. Well, anything that doesn't deteriorate beyond being repairable, or taking incredible amounts of time to repair and materials that could have been maintained,
Right.
makes.
Or the
not
cost
very-
of
not-
hiring someone from the outside to come in and do it instead.
And do it, right. Not particularly economical or fiscally wise, I guess. Thank
Okay,
you.
the next part of the highway department budget is their general expenses. A lot of these budgets are structured the same way, with utilities being the beginning. We have the highway garage, obviously, to maintain, and then we start getting into radio equipment, and then some services, engineering, line painting, sign replacement, viewer control, etc. And then repairs, building maintenance, and then down at the bottom, gasoline. And then we do have some minor monies that are incorporated into the budget for repair work, such as sidewalks and drainage. Next page, we have vehicle maintenance, miscellaneous equipment expense, such as chainsaws and edges and such, and then soft costs such as workshops, training, detail money. And at the very bottom, we have stormwater and dams. So these are 2 things that we added the last couple of years. Stormwater, if you've been following along, as Mary mentioned about the video and the things that Steve and I have been dealing with 29 other partner towns, the EPA is issuing their new stormwater permit this year. The towns are obligated to comply with, or you're subject to fines. And we've been trying to do what we can over the last couple of years to get ourselves up to the point where we just came into compliance with the 2003 permit that was issued. A lot of the towns, including Spencer, were nowhere near where they need to be in terms of complying and preparing for the new permit, and avoiding non-compliance and fines from that. Finally brought ourselves up to where we needed to be, and now we're preparing to incorporate all the requirements under the new permit. I think they're currently in the comment period, and I would expect that permit to be released this year, such as I think New Hampshire's was last year. So that's.
So what actually does that entail? 'Cause
There's multiple components in the permit, and we kind of segregated some of them. One is obviously good record keeping, mapping your system. So we actually have to go out, physically survey and locate items. We have to then go out and do inspections of all of our outflows, catch basins, culverts, drainage structures, and And not only inspection, the new thing that's coming out this year is that we actually have to spend money to actually sample and test the water that's coming out of there, looking for illicit discharges and other contaminants that are within the water. That's something that was not there before. And then you have to report that. We have an annual report that's due, I think every May. They report to the EPA all the things that we've done in the past year. And it's, it's a 15, 16-page spreadsheet of all the things that you're doing. And on top of that, we're required to perform different education tasks, meet certain regulations. All of our own buildings have to be in compliance. We have to have programs in each one of our buildings in addition to our system monitoring that, all of our own buildings, as we are a user and a contributor to the environment. We have to have plans, make sure all of our buildings are mapped out. We have standard operating procedures for when events happen. So that, a lot of it, we should have been doing before, we never were. And that's been something that, going back to when Mr. McNeil was here, and then I came in back in 2008, that we were preaching to the Board of Selectmen that we had to eventually incorporate this, and this committee as well. And we did apply for and receive about $500,000 in grants in 11, 12, and 13. And then we used that to share some of the resources with with 30 towns sharing those grant money, so that we weren't all creating our own education plan, or using different engineers to help guide us. We kind of pooled our resources together and made that money go as far as we could. But that doesn't help us now. The grants have run out. The CIC grant was eliminated as part of the 9C cuts in the fall in 2014. So we're on our own now, and that's why this is in the budget. And something that also was never in the budget was dams. The town owns multiple dams and needs annual maintenance and upkeep in order to prevent, just like you would your roof at your house or your boiler system for doing preventative maintenance, to prevent long-term major capital repairs and expenses. We need to have annual monies to be tied to those systems that we use. So those were incorporated into the budget last year, and hopefully we're in a good spot for it. Okay.
So, but I'm a little more basic than that. That means when it rains, this is about making sure that extra water doesn't go into the sewer or drainage
It's
system?
it's not, well, a couple things, it's multiple things. It's not extra, well,
I mean, so you're not
So when
tying
we're-
a downspout into the sewer system?
How about, can I explain?
yeah.
Sure.
So the stormwater requirements are derived from a law called the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. So the emphasis is pollutants. And the goal of that act is to try to eliminate pollutants in water. Now they've gotten to the point to where stormwater carries a lot of pollutants. Whatever's on your roof, whatever's on the house, whatever's on the road has these pollutants. So you have a combination of pollutants you can see, sediments, then you have pollutants you can't see, could be chemicals, or could be pathogens, could be microbial. Dog waste, pet waste, that's a problem. Pet waste is a serious problem. It's a health concern, and it's a water quality concern. The stormwater permit, the permit that's out right now, that's a draft permit, you have this 1-inch binder of tonight's meeting. My permit's in a 3-inch binder, and it's so full that it doesn't close. This permit that we're talking about is between 12 and 1,500 pages. We could talk about all the requirements for a couple of days. But some of the big ones are just basic water quality. The things that Adam pointed to, they're going out and doing the regular testing. But we're supposed to be out there looking for illicit connections, and so that's why we're out there sampling. And if we find something that indicates that someone might be, let's say, have their laundry going into stormwater, we're supposed to be, if we find evidence of a surfactant of laundry detergent in our testing, we're supposed to try to find where that came from, try to figure out where it came from upstream. Spencer has impaired waterways, and those are waterways that are impaired for a number of reasons. It could be impaired for fisheries, it could be impaired recreationally. Our impaired waterways are impaired primarily pathogenic manure, dog waste, pet waste, and then just your basic contaminants. So any discharges that you have that are going to these classified as polluted waterways, you're supposed to kind of target those, and you're supposed to come up with strategies. Some of those strategies might be building a retention pond, so that you improve water quality where this discharge is. Before, we used to just clean out all our catch basins, we take our sediment and the sediment that came out of the catch basin and worry about disposing of it. Under this permit, I have to keep track of all the sediment that I remove from every single catch basin. I need to be able to tell you how much sediment I removed from that catch basin over there last year. And if it's over a certain amount, I need to tell you what my strategy is to maintain it more regularly, or to try to figure out how to reduce the amount of whatever is in there from getting it. If it's abnormal amount, try to find out why it's abnormal and how to reduce it. Those are just a few things. Like I said, it could go on for a very long time. So our public outreach kind of reaches to this too, because that's one of the things that generally people think of, it's rainwater. It rain down, it falls on my roof, it runs across the ground, what's the big deal? It's what it picks up on the way.
So this is a recurring cost now that will be here every year?
Yes.
And the mapping system, that is also a recurring cost every year?
It'll probably turn into some different cost. There'll always be mapping to some degree and something to do with GIS. It's higher in these early years because that's one of our primary tasks in these early years. And then some of those other costs are gonna go up in the later years.
So the mapping, the system,
Yes?
is it 50% mapped or 90% mapped?
Our current system is probably 95% mapped. We've gone a long way with regard to that, and actually made some good strides this year. So I think in the near future, the monies will be focused on other elements of the
So
permit.
this 35,000, that's for the remaining 5% that needs to be mapped, or is it to maintain that mapping system?
Both. You're always maintaining, you got some type of adjustments or whatever. The 35,000 is for both in this year.
So just the maintenance will probably be?
5 to 10,
5 to 10.
yeah, if you don't have any additions and stuff.
One of the,
But GIS includes the data that's in it. So when we do these catch basin cleaners, we have it somewhat automated where our catch basin cleaner has a tablet, computer tablet, iPad tablet, and he puts in what he has in there, so the sediments go into this GIS. So me knowing like what that catch basin has so much sediment in it, I'm using the GIS. So the GIS is, even though you have the system mapped, it's being used for other purposes. It's keeping and tracking the data of how the system works.
And that's a state system?
It's our system, it's Spencer's. It's the CMRPC, it's the regional
the grant
system.
paid for the software and paid for the tablet, and we bought 2 high-tech survey pieces of equipment with the $500,000. And on a regional basis with 30 towns, we share the survey equipment. Each town has its own tablet, and each town has its own software. We have a vendor that maintains a website and program for us, so we can actually look and see our neighbors' points and systems. So if we have, water has no boundaries, so if our water is carrying into someone else's, or vice versa, we have the ability to see what's coming and going. And again, it's a digitized format. We can save reports, print out reports, and use those reports so that we eventually file our annual report with EPA. You can show what we've been doing. So we've tried to go as far as we can with grants, and I think in the end we'll probably save millions of dollars across the 30 towns. But now we're on our own, and you know, at least we had that money in front, but we could have used that money to get us to the point where we are.
So is that software consultant shared by the 10 towns?
Correct. We actually, with the grant, we actually purchased 3 years in advance. So we have for the next 3 years paying for some software. It's basically like a web, you know, someone's maintaining a web for us, maintaining the compatibility for us to go up. They will load new information, update maps and such. So we've, again, tried to go as far as we can out with grants, but they're gonna run out. Each town is at a different point. We try to get every single town up to the same point in terms of having them all be as close to 100% mapped. Not everybody is. So we've done as much as we could in the time that we had. We're sharing equipment. We're also sharing We purchased a bunch of water quality test kits with the grant. And other things, we partnered up with WPI students to do some of the survey work for us, do some testing for us, so we think we've done a pretty good job. We were a good model. We had, after our grant, there was 4 or 5 other regional coalitions that established themselves after us and using us as a model. But at the end of the day, each town is gonna have some of their own individual costs, and that's what we've incorporated into the budget.
Anyone else? All right, thanks. We can-
Right. Actually, I forgot, we had snow and ice also. So, how could I forget?
That's fine.
10 days from spring. So the next page, you have a summary of the last 9 to 10 years or so of what we annually budget for snow and ice and what we annually spend in terms of actual numbers. So you can see above, we've slowly tried to creep up to try to close the gap from what we budget and what we spend. Keeping in mind that every spring, we are usually taking free cash and balancing our budget, and that will happen again this year. Every money we take from free cash and use to balance our budget before June 30th to apply to our underfunded original snow budget, that's $1 taken away from a capital project. And as some of the folks that were in here before at the capital committee meeting, I think we had $1.6 million in projects requested. We had $800,000 in free cash, and we'll be using about 400 of that to balance this year's budget. So every snowflake that fell this year was a penny or so taken away from a capital project. So those projects will not get done this year. And we'll be back on the docket again next year. Will be that much more needed. So you can see from '07 to '15, which is the year we're in now, we've gone from 87 to 180.
Budgeted.
Budgeted, yeah. The selectmen 2 weeks ago increased that budget amount from 180 by an additional 300,000 to 480. Okay, so we did set a record, last record being 2013, where we spent 394,000. So this year we have now adjusted our budget to be 480. It's left to be seen if that's enough, if we have to go up any higher. So that's why you have NAs in the approved budget section under the actual expenditures. And then you can see we budgeted a minor increase for FY16 to again try to close that gap from what we fund to what actually we spend, so that free cash can be saved for capital projects. Any questions for Steve, who's had a interesting year, interesting winter to say the least?
There were a couple storms that were guaranteed for reimbursement, right?
One,
Just one,
yes.
The blizzard, the end of January.
that's it.
The-
But that won't
June.
come till next year by the time
Correct.
at the end of the year.
Correct. That amounted to something between $35,000 and $40,000 for that 3-day storm. The part that was eligible for reimbursement.
So that money, will that go into the general fund?
That money will come back as a miscellaneous revenue source next year, so it's a FEMA reimbursement. So it'll be,
Maybe. We got our 2011 reimbursement this year.
Uh,
Oh, no, we haven't gotten it yet.
if it comes in, it will go in the account that's known as miscellaneous revenue. If it comes back within the same fiscal year, you have the option of taking it and applying it back to the accounts that you spent the money out of. But that never happens. So we usually come back the following year, it's used as a miscellaneous revenue. It's not, which falls under the local receipts that I'll go through in a second. However, you don't budget or ever bank on miscellaneous revenue because you never know what's gonna come in. I think 6 or 7 years ago, there was a settlement, MTV settlement that came in, so the town had some money that came in, I forget who paid it. One of the gas stations or something that paid, so the town had an influx of money and then reallocated to something else, but we never bank on miscellaneous revenue. But so it's necessary. Obviously, you have a storm, you have to spend the money to do it. You do the best you can with the people you have, and then when you don't, the budget's underfunded, you go in front of the selectmen and ask for a transfer, if you will, or the ability to deficit spend, and then town meeting actually transfers the money to balance the budget before June 30th. I was mentioned to the selectmen a couple weeks ago. I was at a meeting in Boston with some other town managers, and they were talking about how a lot of towns, what they do is that money will just go forward to June 30th, and as part of that statute, you can deficit spend at the end, going into the closeout of the year, so they can either offset that over expenditure with money that they would have had for free cash, so it would come off your free cash, or you can apply it to the following year's tax rate and use your additional tax levy to fund that snow and ice. We don't do that. We are fortunate enough that we will be able to balance our budget before June 30th and not have it impact us in FY16. Okay. Transfer station. So transfer station is divided into two components. In terms of expenses, we have salaries and wages, then we have general expenses, and then we also have a revenue piece that's not shown on here, which our revenues obviously are stickers and our bag fees. But, so the transfer station budget pays for a portion of Steve's salary, as we mentioned before, being tied to UNF and water. We have 4 monitors that we have that work part-time, non-benefit positions. The transfer stations are open on Wednesdays and Saturdays, I believe.
Yes.
Used to be Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. We've restructured our program. The selectmen put that forth last year as a goal, and we'll find out at the end of the year how well we did. I think one of the things we know is we will have an adjustment at town meeting to counter the cost of private hauling. We had an estimate of approximately $300 per haul, and I think, as Steve is showing here, it costs us $500. So we did underfund that item this year, so we'll take some free cash to balance the budget this year. What we, basically, essentially what we did was we eliminated or switched from completely a private operation to more of a town personnel operation. So our monitors, they used to be, the program used to be monitored and run by a couple of private individuals that were paid by a vendor, and we paid the vendor. And also the hauling was done by a private vendor, that same vendor known as WeCare, if you've heard that term in past years. So we've switched that. We now operate it ourselves with town employees. We do pay for hauling under the general expense account, which you can see is the second line item. We also have a contract with Wheelabrator. Wheelabrator is the large smokestack and plant that you see in Millbury. I think it's 36 towns that utilize them or have a contract with them. We're part of that contract. We renegotiated with Wheelabrator this past year to save the town. I think at the end of the day we'll save about $16,000 a year with a new fee. We had a 10-year out. After 10 years, we have a 20-year contract. After year 10, you could get out. However, you had to notify them in year 8. So in year, I think year 9. So in year 8 we began, which is now, we began the process of renegotiating, notified them. They came back with a lower fee, and now we have an amended contract moving forward. Sound about right?
Yes.
And then the other costs associated, we've realigned our recycling, so it's single stream to try and save money. We still have construction debris costs, hazardous waste costs, miscellaneous debris, compost grinding, and then we actually have to pay for our bags up front, our stickers up front, other costs associated with running the transfer station, such as electricity, preventative maintenance, trailer repairs, etc., etc. So at the end of this year, when we close out on June 30th, Steve and I projected moving forward that we did under budget the cost of the transportation and hauling. Once we received those bids, they came in higher than we originally thought. So we'll have to make an adjustment at town meeting. There'll be an Article 1, which will balance the FY15 budget, snow and ice, this, and a couple other items. And then at the end of June 30th, we'll see how we did in terms of our revenue, seeing if there was any drop off. And one of the things that the selectmen did was increase the fees to try and again make this department self-sufficient and balance themselves, have the users that are using basically essentially pay for the cost of running the operation. So we'll be back in the fall to report how we did after when the audit is complete.
So I personally like the single stream recycling. It's way easier to use. Is it turning out, you don't know yet if it's an advantage cost-wise, or do you?
I know that it's an advantage cost-wise, and be able to see how much cost-wise, really, I'll wait until the end of the year to look at the numbers. I'm hoping that there's flat numbers I can see what the advantages are cost-wise, but the other advantage that we're looking for cost-wise is for people to start recycling more. Because what you take out of the trash and put into the single stream is a lot less expensive to get rid of than what you throw into the hopper. So there could be some additional, hopefully is going to be some additional savings there. Those are gonna be kinda hard to spot, but I can look at them just by seeing increases in quantities.
And decrease in,
Decrease in trash, increase in recycling, but I have to prorate it versus number of users as well.
So when did it start, the fees go up and the bag costs go up? Was that June?
It was July, wasn't it?
July
The
1.
bag
July?
cost went up as of, I think it was April.
Yeah.
And then the fees and sticker prices went up as of July 1st. The single stream went into effect as of July 1st, but the compactors really weren't open until September. So we still did do a little bit of sorting while we were trying to get the compactors installed.
So do you know, did the same number of people buy stickers so far?
It's less, by a little more than 10% less than the previous year.
10% less?
Was that factored in when,
Yeah, actually,
We did discuss that as a
we
possibility.
factored in a 10% loss and actually was something greater than what we had factored in. But I don't think it was like, I have to go look at the numbers. I don't like to speak about numbers if I don't know off the top of my head. But it is greater than the 10% estimate that we hope was gonna be our maximum.
Well, any other additional questions?
Do you think that was due to the fact that the transfer station reduced the number of days that it was open, or just because of the cost increase?
I think it's both factors.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing that, we're basically on the borderline of where that cost balances itself out. And I don't have knowledge of how many users fall into that category. By what I mean is, we did a study about 2 years earlier. Probably where any family that's generating 2 bags of trash a week or less, the cheapest place to go to is the transfer station. No question about it. If you start generating 3 or 4 bags of trash per week on average for a whole year, then you're 3, you're in that gray area, and 4, it might be more cost effective for you to have someone pick it up at your driveway. So I think it's a matter of some people figuring those things out. You know, why drive to the station every week when I can have it picked up at the end of my driveway for almost the same price? So convenience, hours, price,
Okay.
all to play in.
Well, no one has any more questions. Thank you very much for spending time with us and
Thank you
going
all.
over what we had questions about.
Good luck.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda would be Mr. Gaudette.
So it's labeled on there as the governor's budget update, but it's actually going to be an update of our total town budget, but it's a result of the governor releasing his budget last year, which a couple of factors or unknowns were finally known, and that includes what our local aid would be, and also what our obligations would be for minimum local contributions for our school assessments, and as part of that, we're able to figure out from the total assessments themselves that we received last week from Spencer, East Brookfield, and Bay Path, what our gaps are. So I made this presentation last night to the Board of Selectmen. You're going to hear the same thing, and I also forwarded it to the Spencer East Brookfield Regional School District after receiving their preliminary budget last week as well, basically to inform them of the position that we currently are in by the numbers that came out last week. So, as you recall, I did an initial budget presentation. This memo that I have is an update to that, so it follows the same format. And then at the very end, I have the 3 essential pages for the budget that you need to know, which is our revenues and our expenses, and then an overall general summary of all of our expenses and our obligations. So, any questions, please stop, and I'll do my best to answer. So, the first thing we do with the town is we start with revenues. Again, we divide them up into several different categories. The first is our tax levy. So in 2016, our tax levy limit, this is a known, what's known as the 296,614. That is a number that we can guarantee that is 2.5% over our existing levy. So we can factor in that is going to be new revenue. We also provide for an estimated new growth We have a number, and I think I showed you a 5-year projection before, where we're anywhere from, say, 55 to 95, 75 being kind of right in the middle. That is a number that you forecast at this time of the year in May, when we go to town meeting, what new money will be added to the tax rolls above and beyond our existing property tax revenue. That is anyone who's building an addition on their home, anyone who builds a new house, new equipment at a factory, those types of things. That's what we call new growth. It's an estimate. We know it will come on. It is not known until our values are certified by the Department of Revenue, excuse me, in, say, September. And that's done,
Sure, huh?
that's done by the Board of Assessors. Okay, so if there's any adjustment come the fall, when we finally do our final budget and we submit it to the Department of Revenue under the recap, there could be a minor adjustment. It could be a little bit up, a little bit down, but it's not gonna go from 75 to 750. It could go from like 75 to 86, 75 to 62, something like that. But you need to have an estimate now, and it is additional revenue that we can count on, we just don't have an exact number. We're still carrying 5 debt exclusion projects.
I'm sorry, can I just, do you know what it was last year? This year?
I think it was 86.
Okay.
That's why I used that number. Back. I'm pretty sure 86,000. So the 5 projects that we have still, the ladder truck, Sibley Farm, Town Hall, Wire Village, and Bay Path, I've listed the payoff years. There's a slight adjustment downward, however, that does not increase new money to be spent somewhere else, because these dollar amounts are linked directly to our debt service, and they cancel each other out. So we're allowed to increase the levy by the payment that we have to make for that particular project. The next set of revenues is the cherry sheet, also known as local aid. This was unknown until last week, when the governor released his budget on Wednesday, March 4th. The governor in his House 1 budget projects a 3.6% local aid increase. That would amount to $94,328. Keeping in mind that if you multiply 3.6 times 2.293, you're not going to get that. That's because only a portion of the state aid is known as unrestricted general government aid. There's other things in there, such as veterans aid reimbursements, such as the library offset. Those things are not factored into that 3.6. The unrestricted government aid is essentially lottery aid, comes from the lottery, and he's proposing a 3.6% increase going back to the towns. That is $94,000. As I mentioned in my first presentation, we typically will level fund local receipts, because this is very unknown. It's unknown, even this late in the year, what those numbers will be. It's based on how many building permits people will buy in the spring. It's based on how many cars people will buy, how many times someone, our fines, our investment income, relatively flat. But we try to pretty much be conservative, keep that level funded, and we're usually pretty good in that. If there's any room in that number moving forward at the end of the year, it will turn into free cash. But there's not a lot of room in this number. There's not hundreds of thousands of dollars here that are available to balance a budget. If anything, there's tens of thousands. And that is one area being the meals tax, which is unknown. This is our first year. It started a quarter late, so we're unsure of how that's going to turn out, whether or not that's going to meet the goal that we set. We'll see at the end of the year. So we're not going to forecast any increase in local receipts, so that gives us any new money in that area that we can now balance our budget with. Okay, so those are your 3 sources of revenue. Unfortunately, at the top of page 2, we had to use free cash in the FY15 to balance the budget. So if you move forward in the following year and you have that same level of expenses, we don't have that $80,000 this year. So now, essentially, our revenue should factor in that offset as not being there that year. In FY 2016. We had to use that because of mid-year, actually in the late fall, we had to deal with a new fire truck, which was a $450,000 item, and we also had additional students at the out-of-district vocational education program, which you don't find out until after the May town meeting. So we used that free cash to balance the budget. Okay, that money's not there this year unless the selectmen vote to do that, which was not something we'd like to do. We did that versus asking the voters for a debt exclusion for the fire truck. We figured we'd be creative. We did a 5-year lease with an annual payment. That lease is still in the budget, but the free cash is not projected to be in the budget as a revenue source next year, because again, it's surplus money from a prior year. And then the other language is standard language from previous memorandums. So at the bottom of page 2, again, this is the same as you saw in my initial budget, that hasn't changed. We have approximately an $8.5 million general government budget, and what I'd like to call a very modest increase this year is 1.5%, which is only $128,000. Now let's look at our other costs. So that budget, that 1.5% increase, we reduced our expenses to meet some of the offsets and obligations that we have. We have obligations with our collective bargaining agreements, we have an obligation with our pension program, we have an obligation with our health insurance. So those were factored in, those costs. In order to meet those and keep that number down around 1.5%, we actually reduced some costs in some other areas. As you see at the bottom of page 3 and the top of page 4, you'll see where it calls out, we decreased expenses such as town council and gasoline and some other items, again, to try and keep our increase this year very modest at 1.5%, knowing that we'd have to be dealing with 2.5%, and again, obligations with our education assessments. The discouraging news is what is in the middle of page 4. Understandably, it's a preliminary budget. It was voted on and approved and sent down to us before knowing what minimum local contribution numbers were. However, it's certainly disheartening when the budget is $1 million higher than last year. If you look at FY15 to FY16 for Spencer East Brookfield Regional School District, you can see that our minimum local contribution, that's what's mandated by the state that you have to pay, the foundation budget if you will, increased by 3%, which isn't too bad, $182,000. The hard part is that once you factor in their entire assessment, that's the $8.6 million that they gave us. They've looked at all of their revenues, they looked at all their expenses. After Chapter 70, the bill that remains is for the towns. I then divide that bill up into two pieces, being the minimum local and the additional local. The additional local, that's above and beyond our responsibility, is a 111% increase over last year, or $672,000. In addition, their transportation assessment went up by 17%, or $180,000, and their debt services stayed relatively flat. At the end of the day, the budget that came down was a 13.5% increase. And as you know, we deal with Proposition 2.5 restrictions. We try to keep the town side at again, modest at 1.5. Theirs was 13.5%. Take further note, in the next paragraph, you'll see that the Department of Education has their enrollment as decreasing. 83 the students from Spencer no longer attending the district. Moving to the next paragraph, this is Baypath preliminary assessments. Baypath essentially gave us a level funded budget except for the minimum local increase. So the minimum local increased by 23%, unfortunately. The reason for that, if you look at the paragraph below the chart, their enrollment went up by 19 students, from 133 to 152. So we're now going to have to pay for those costs. We would have been paying for them anyway, we're just paying for them at a different school. The only thing that, the problem with that is that the cost of vocational education is higher than traditional education, right? So therefore you have that 23% increase. Transportation assessment went up by 29,000. The buy-in assessment stayed flat. The debt went up by 50,000. However, that's tied to the debt exclusion, so I'm not too concerned about that because we're allowed to offset that through additional tax levy. But again, they gave us no additional local contribution. They only charged us the minimum in terms of the operating assessment. The bottom of page 5, you can see the overall increase that the town will receive as proposed by these two budgets is 15%, or $1.2 million more than last year.
So if the system lost 83 students, why is it, shouldn't that save money?
I think what they'll tell you that, because you lose, if you have 28 kids in a classroom and you lose 2 students in that class, you're not going to eliminate the teacher, right? I think what I did in my correspondence to them yesterday and this morning was, I'd like to see them take a look at the transportation costs. When you lose 83 students and your transportation costs go up 180,000, I'd really like them to take a look at the routes that they have set up, how many kids are on each bus, and whether or not they can change the routes, consolidate the routes, such that we're not dealing with that cost. It's a 17% increase, which we would like to see them be able to justify that and take another look at that in terms of what they could do to keep that number as reasonable as possible. 17% increase is really tough.
And the other, right, and the other question I have with that, they did this budget before House One came out, and I believe transportation is funded at a lower percent, regional school transportation reimbursement, that the state decided to fund it at a lower percentage than it did last year, which is, so on one hand, they're saying that they're not reducing our local aid, but the net effect is they're still reducing the town
yeah.
cost, and when, you know, when the state doesn't, the state's supposed to reimburse regional school transportation 100%. It has done that one time, and that was last year.
Yep.
So I don't know if they factored that in, I don't know what the factor was for their transportation, but it could be,
That's why I
An
asked
extra
for a
hit.
further breakdown and further
Exactly,
explanation,
yeah.
because all we do is get the line item. We get the
Yeah.
line item that says $1.2 million.
right,
We don't have any background.
Background,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I'd like to see is in terms of what are the costs, how many routes, what is the difference from last year, this year, how, you know, the kids changing. And then, of course, the changes in reimbursement and cost. It's 180,000, and if you look at, actually it's not in this, but their $180,000 increase in the minimum local contribution and the $180,000 increase in the transportation assessment alone eats up all of our new revenue. 360 of our 370 new revenue, so 98%. So if you look, all you need to know really is the summary on the bottom of page 6. So as I mentioned, we have $371,000 in new levy, $94,000 in new aid, offset by an $80,000 reduction in free cash that's not available. We have about $385,000 in new revenue next year. So when I looked at our numbers, $128,000 or 1.5% increase, I thought I was doing pretty good. But then when you get a 13.5% increase from Spencer East Brookfield and 27.5% increase from Bay Path, the additional revenue, the 385, minus the additional cost of 1.4, leaves a gap of 1.1, or 1 million, plus we had a $100,000 in adjustments that we were able to use in our debt exclusion bonds, premiums, abatements. We have a $907,000 deficit after having gone through what we went through last year. If they were to eliminate the additional local increase and only charge us the minimum local contribution increase and the transportation increase, our deficit would be $235,000. That means I would have to go back into our budget and look at that 128 and get that to 107,000 below where we were last year to balance the budget. That's if they were able to do that, which is left to be seen. If, you know, obviously if we dealt with a $907,000 budget, I don't really know what to say.
So in terms of the 235,000, or if you got it down to 100 and whatever, how many, in your town budget, are there any mandates that you have to pay, that you have to provide for, that are non-negotiable, that can't come out?
Well, I'd say when you go into the town's budget, I mean, the majority of it is untouchable in terms of providing a service that you want, so.
Oh,
There's certain things like-
I'm not talking about.
Like a
I'm talking
retirement
about
pension?
I'm talking about regulations that would restrict you, that say you have to have X position, Y position, Z position, or anything like that.
Well, we don't look at it that way. I mean, there's a mandate that may come out, such as stormwater, that's an example.
Yep.
But that's only $90,000 and $8.5 million budget. But if you want 16 police officers, you have to pay this much for police officers. You have to train them, you have to provide them with equipment, you have to provide them with a vehicle, you have to put gas in the vehicle, you have to fix the tires. So
Right.
the way I look at it is, there's not really much items left in our budget to go backwards in, unless you're gonna start dealing with less police.
I agree with
You know,
you, I
et
just
cetera, et cetera.
didn't
But-
know,
but
I
I-
just didn't know if there were.
The mandate part of it,
Occasionally, something will get in there that is totally useless, but somebody says you have to have it. You know, I mean, I'm just asking if
Yeah,
there's anything
yeah.
in there like that.
I mean, there are definitely things in there that, you know, you have to provide burning permits for the public, right? The town's responsible for issuing burning permits. It's a permitted thing. So the
Mhm.
fire chief has to do that, and he also has to train 40 firefighters and do other things, so he has an assistant. So as part of that mandate to offer the burning permit, there's an expense on us to do
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
So, I mean, you know, Plowing the streets,
we're
you could be
just-
considered a mandate, but I mean, we don't look at it.
But
that way.
we're at the point, there's not much left.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't
I
even know
mean, how
what.
much further backwards are we gonna go?
Well, I mean, all I'm trying to do every year is maintain. And I mean, just alone with the minimum local contribution increases alone, we have a 235 deficit, right? So, but that's with the transportation again. If they can get that down, drop 30 grand, and get down to about 200,000, we're going backwards again this year. And if we're looking at 900 grand,
What do you do?
I mean, we've had 5 failed overrides since May of 13. I don't expect another one. So, again, we've already cut town hall by 25%. We cut the library by 25%. We closed our parks. We eliminated a highway position. As Steve mentioned, we were at 11 a couple years ago. You know, now it's the cuts that go deeper are going to hurt a lot deeper. They were deep before. 900,000 is just a stupid number for us to deal with. I mean, after what we went through last year.
Yeah.
So, that being said, I made a plea to them in an email, and I think my board will continue that effort, is that the hopes that they can get that down to a reasonable, we're dealing with Proposition 2.5. Everybody knows what Proposition 2.5 is, you only get 2.5% new money every year. When they're asking for a 13.5% increase, you know, and we're not getting any new more,
Maybe it's time to relook at the 2.5.
and we're not getting,
Maybe it should be 3.5, you know.
if we were getting 3.5 and they were still asking for 13.5,
I
I'd
know.
be saying the
It's
same
still-
thing. I'd be saying the
I
same
know.
thing I'm saying right now,
I know.
is
But
that
over
it just,
time-
But I'm just saying, it should, maybe
Right.
that number itself
it
should
doesn't,
be.
the numbers don't add up.
Right,
No.
right, and
I mean,
over
it's-
time, I mean, if things had been a little bit different over time, with a little bit more leeway between 2.5, maybe you would have had a little bit more room to structure things, you know, but this is over a lot of years, and you can't fix it all now, so.
I think I'd like to just say one thing, one message to the people that are watching this at home.
Speak aloud.
Yeah, we're not, well, by saying this and talking about the doom and gloom that we're talking about here, it's not that we don't support education. The problem is that the budgets that we're getting that are being delivered to the town on an annual basis means that we have to cut everything on the town side to meet that budget because we don't have additional revenue. It's a completely discouraging environment for the people that work here, and it's nearly impossible to provide the services that people want. And people can say that as whining, crying, I don't care. It's just, you know, you're dealing with faced with a $900,000 budget deficit, which is 10% after cutting what we cut last year and the year before. It's just crushing. So again, we're not, that we don't support, I fully understand the school department has needs, and they need to do things, and they need money in order to move from a level 3 district to a level 2 district. But at this expense to the town, it's gonna devastate your town services. So there has to be some kind of compromise between the two leaderships for both organizations. So, that's all I gotta say.
Right, well, and given that minimum local is still, the minimum local requirement is still pushing us over the top.
The minimum local alone is taking up all of our new levy, which I would be more than happy with, because it would just be, at least, we'd be maintaining the
Right.
services and the levels that we have in our budget this year, or close to it. Yeah.
So the budget, I mean, the hearings on the Chapter 70 reform are winding up, was the last one today or in Boston?
They had a meeting today. Nothing's gonna happen in FY16.
Right.
The report is gonna come out at the end of June,
Yep.
and the one thing you can expect is that the minimum local contribution number, or actually, take it back, the one thing you can count on is the foundation budget will go up. What remains to be seen is if the state's gonna pony up additional Chapter 70 so that the minimum local contributions don't go up as well. Guarantee that the formula is gonna mean that you're gonna be required to spend more per student in your district, which is fine, and I don't disagree with that. We're having a hard time struggling meeting that obligation without any new revenue. So the new revenue, what we've been pleading to at the public hearings at the state level is, if you're gonna do this, you need to pony up more money, you need to put up more Chapter 70 money, otherwise we're just gonna continue to go
But
backwards.
they also need to go back and look at what their requirements are, what they're mandating the money is being spent on, and I've heard that message from several people at the hearings as well. They just keep asking for more money without looking to see if they still need some of the programs they have, if what they're spending it on, what their formulas are, et cetera, are reasonable and logical as well. So there are two pieces to it, and they have to address both, or neither, or nothing will be resolved. And I've heard a few people say that to me too. So,
So next steps are, my understanding is the school committee has a meeting on the 19th next week. I'm hoping that they will review this memo along with an email that I sent, asking them to take a look at some things, understanding that what we'd be looking at. And also in advance of, between now and then, I'll start working with staff to talk about what kind of reductions we can make and how they would affect operations here at Town Hall and within the rest of the town. And then prior to the end of the month, you'll have a warrant. The selectmen will vote on a warrant, vote on a budget to be put on the warrant. You will have a public hearing on the budget. You will vote your recommendations on the warrant. And again, if it's anywhere near the 907, I can guarantee the board, we're not gonna be able to meet that demand without asking, the budget for the school district would be contingent upon an override, and we'll go through the same process we went through the last couple of years. There's no way we can cut 907,000. And I don't think we should have to,
No.
in my opinion.
If you did have to cut personnel,
Oh, my gosh.
would they cut police officers?
When you look at $907,000, yeah. When you look at 200,000, we're coming close.
I can't even,
We cut the
It's like
li,
roll up the sidewalks and close the town.
I mean, we shut the library down a day last year, this year, that was 25% reduction in their budget, 40% reduction in staff. The building inspector, when I first started in '08, we had a full-time building inspector and a part-time building inspector. Right now, you have a building inspector that's 19.5 hours and gets no benefits. So that's what we're left with right now.
and so it's
So-
the building, what's the net effect of having a half-time building inspector instead of?
A lot of angry customers,
They just.
because
they
they're
just have
waiting.
to
He
wait.
can only do so much inspections, he can only review so many plans, he can only, he's gotta inspect town buildings, he has to inspect all of the commercial buildings, he has to do, when someone's doing a project, he has to go and inspect that project, he has to review plans, he has to work with other staff on projects. So, yeah, his time to get things done means that we have a lot of angry customers. I get a lot of phone calls because when people aren't satisfied with a particular department, they're calling me. But, you can only do what you can do. So, we only have one full-time fireman in this town. I mean, there's no room to cut.
That alone is scary.
There's no room to cut there. Most of the offices now, they all had a 25% cut in town hall last year. They come crying to me every day with the workload that they have. Doesn't change the workload any,
Right, the work does not go away.
doesn't go anywhere. So, to go further beyond that, it's, in order to run a certain size town of this population with certain size school district and certain number of properties, you have a certain number of properties, you have to process a certain number of tax bills, you have to get those out, you have to collect them, you have to deal with late, people paying late, all those things. That takes a certain amount of work to do, and when you don't have the people to do it, it's a tough environment for people to work in. And there's not a lot of happy people this morning after reading the letter that I sent around to staff yesterday about the $900,000 deficit. We were hoping that we would get some hours back, because we're hopeful with Governor Baker's new budget and hopeful with the new levy, that we would, maybe get a couple hours back in one or two offices. And obviously, we're looking at going the opposite way, so.
And for myself, my time's fairly flexible now, so I can get into town hall if I need to on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but there are a lot of people who can't. I can't imagine how they're getting their business done that they need to get done. To say nothing of the staff workload not changing or anything. Any movement at the state level? We're not the only town. I mean, we're in worse shape than lots and lots of towns, but we're not the only town that's
Well, I was reading the article today, I think, in the Wachusett School District. I think they were overwhelmed with the 3.5% increase, I think it was, that they received.
Mhm.
Ours is 13.5.
But the,
And they-
on
they
the
didn't
town,
have-
but on the town side, when you talk to other town administrators, is there a movement to talk to the folks at the state level?
This is a local problem. If there's a state problem in terms of the amount of Chapter 70 that's funded and the formula that's broken down, this is a local problem when you're getting a 13.5% increase. It's not right. We are dealing with Proposition 2.5. 13.5% increase is not right. It's not right. That's a local problem.
Alrighty. Do you think that that the town, the people who voted against it cannot afford the taxes, or they choose, they just don't wanna pay? I mean, do you see, when you look at the demographics,
I'm not gonna judge anybody's decision to not vote for a tax increase. That's a personal decision based on what they have to put on the table for food, whether they are working, whether they're not. People who are not working the same hours that they were in 2008, changed careers, fixed incomes, etc. Each individual's decision on when they go to the ballot box to increase taxes is their own. Would I like more people to vote yes than no so that we can at least maintain what we have? Absolutely. But again, I think this is a leadership problem. I think this goes to for me, as the school committee. When you're sending down a 13.5% increase to the town that cut $500,000 worth of services last year, I think it's got,
I think I asked the question the wrong way. Based on the value of the real estate in the town, are we, I don't know, our values aren't as high as a lot of towns to begin with, our base values. Are we like slipping backwards, losing?
we have
or-
a low per capita income and low property values, which means low capacity for people to pay more.
That's what I was.
I think from us, what we've tried to do on the general government side,
Mhm.
and by not being able to get additional tax levy through overrides, understand that, and deal with lots of changes on our side, restructuring, eliminating positions, regionalizing positions, and doing something which I think is responsible with a 1.5% increase. And I can't say the same for the school district. I think they start with their expenses. From what I know from their budget, the principals make certain requests. These are what we need to go from a level 3 to a level 2, which may be so. But to then turn around and hand that to the town, $1 million increase, 13.5% over last year, when we have, 300,000 or so new revenue coming in, it's hard to not be angry.
Anyone else, anybody have any other questions for Adam? Comments, et cetera?
So does this mean we're setting up for the same problem we did last year? We had to go up there to town and we had to sit down and the state finally came in and said it. Is that what we're heading for again?
And it's, the ball is in the Spencer East Brookfield School District court. It's up for them to give us a final budget before the end of the month, and hopeful that they can find a way to meet us with some compromise, and we'll see. So,
Why is it that we are stuck with this 2.5 prop and that they can turn around and go 13%? Where's the law involved in that?
there's the statute, when you accept the statute for a regional school district, you accept the statute for the process of adopting a budget. There's not one comment in the statute that reflects Proposition 2.5. The only thing you have the ability to do is to turn down the budget at town meeting, or what the selectmen have done by making contingent upon a ballot question, making it subject to a vote at an election, or an override. Then there's the process for what happens if the budget is turned down, such as them revising it, having another special town meeting, revising it, having a district-wide meeting, and then having the state come in on December 1st. So when you accept and you adopt a statute that allows you to regionalize your school district, you're accepting that process where they are not tied to Proposition 2.5.
And of course, when Spencer regionalized, there was a huge financial incentive. You know, in the 80s when they regionalized K to 8, they had been regionalized in the high school. At that time, it made enormous sense because it was such a huge financial incentive.
So we better off regionalizing than we are if we didn't have be involved in that again?
Well, then then the school department would be a town department. Would be
What
a
would
town
happen is
department, but it still has its own school committees.
What would happen is you would have, at that point, it's subject to the town meeting vote. So I think what happened in Leicester a couple years ago, they had, the school committee requested a budget that was $800,000 higher than what the selectmen put on the town meeting warrant. When I went to the town meeting, the $800,000 increase got approved. The only way the only way the selectmen could then balance the budget was then come back with a special town meeting a month later and reduce that budget on the town side to meet that. So it's just a matter of process at that point. I can't say which process would be better here, I don't know. That's, yeah.
So if there's nothing else, number 7 on the agenda is any other, and since we have 3 members of the selectmen, would any of you gentlemen like to have anything to say? Thank you for coming and listening.
I just, something, I want to add just to, because to Adam's credit, you know, the town has taken a real leadership role with the whole issue of the foundation and re-examining the formulas and all. And Adam responded with a letter recently to the head of the commission's taking a look. And I thought made a very appropriate recommendation, which I hope they'll take to heart, and that is that those minimum local contributions be linked, you know, to the 2.5%, to the growth that we face. And Adam offered a number of 50%, which seems like a good place to start, but at least it starts to set some limits, and it starts to enforce some cooperation, because right now, we are in a regional situation. There's no denying that we've gone down that road. But you have this overwhelming sense that we're losing control of our budget, that we're on a, you know, that every year we get the bill and we have to scramble to, you know, to come up with the funds to make it work. And, you know, and I think people know from a couple of years ago, we forced the issue with a region-wide vote, and the state came in and made a direct recommendation. There's no state body that's gonna come in and make a recommendation, well, you've gotta maintain so many police and so many fire and such a level of services. So that's why there's a tremendous imbalance there. That's just fundamentally unfair when you survey all the demands that are being placed on a community. And that's what I think we find so frustrating when we saw this amount. You say, even if we had, even if you had an override and could restore services, there's always the threat with this arrangement of the state coming in and grabbing that money in one of those, you know, showdowns like we had.
Well, and I will say, as I've never been on a school committee, but having worked in schools in a lot of districts over my whole career, for those of us in the trenches, it was the other side of the coin thing. All our students lost certain things because of state mandates to provide certain other things. And so you see it from the inside as well.
That's why you're talking about looking at the base, what's behind the.
Right, exactly. You know,
Mm-hmm.
dig deeper into it. Yeah, we have a heavy-duty problem in our town, but there are some bigger issues as well that what your legislation, the public hearings and everything begin to address will help some. But there are mandates that are, that in the schools that take away from the general school population to take care of certain other things within the school population. And so, it's frustrating on all levels, it just is. So,
Just as a follow-up, Mary, you're absolutely right. The trouble is that isn't gonna happen whether it's 2 years down the road.
Oh.
And what's gonna devastate this town is if this stays the same way as it is, trust me, you don't know how bad it's gonna
Oh, it's gonna be,
It's,
I can't even think about
I
how.
said last year, lock the town hall. Pretty much what you think.
What's very frustrating is that Adam and I were talking last night, we walked out, and he said, you know, looking back, we're doing, on the town side,
Everything.
doing it relatively well. We have reasonable contracts with our unions, we've managed healthcare increases, we're ahead of the curve on contributions to healthcare. We manage our budgets very closely, and in the end, this happens.
Yeah.
So,
I
it's very,
agree,
very frustrating.
I agree, I mean, really, this is, it's
Well, thank you for having us.
totally unreasonable. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thanks for stopping by.
We'll be back in the same place next week, March 17th. And we will have the library and the police chief and the fire chief starting at 7. And everyone's welcome. There are a few more empty chairs here if anyone would like to come. So, someone
I
can make a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Damaris. Second? Yes, all in favor? Any opposed? All righty, 8:46.